For all of their weakness, these lowlanders appear to live eventful lives. My reports revolve around military operations, Commander Gunner, Ludmilla replied. Please don't take them as examples of everyday life in the Empire. Granted, if the frost giants went storming around the lowlands, life would likely become even more eventful for the citizens of the Empire, or anywhere they went, for that matter. High in the hall of Citadel Stenberg, Ludmilla stood upon the dead Jarl's dais as she participated in the debriefing for her 2 assignments in the Empire. With so much material piled up over the weeks, her presentation took several days as the attendees digested the information, asked questions and discussed the results. Even so, none missed a minute of it, probably because they had been doing nothing but training for nearly half a year and wanted a glimpse of what potentially lay ahead. In attendance were Lord Cocytus and his vassals, who stood behind a table across from her on the platform. The goblin strategist from Carney Village was sitting behind his own table with a few of his captains. Below them, on the rows of stone benches arranged to face the dais were Commander Gunner, Sigurd, and an assortment of frost giants, goblins, death seers, servitors and elder liches. Actually, Ludmilla suspected that most of the Northern Army group were present. It was a good thing that the Citadel's hall was built to accommodate a huge gathering of frost giants. While their discipline is to be lauded, the goblin strategist waved his feather fan lightly. That same discipline displayed brings some troubling truths to light. Is it truly so troublesome? A green-shelled member of Lord Cocytus' retinue asked. That battles are kept free of those complications should be counted a benefit, should it not? That would depend on the objective, the goblin strategist replied. If wars were conducted as a series of mass exterminations, then it would be as you say. But there are many ways to utilize a defeated enemy, and what we see confirmed in Baroness Zaradnik's reports makes that difficult. If I may ask, is this some aspect of warfare that has been recently open to exploration? Heads turned at Ludmilla's question. She did her best not to cringe at the idea that she was once again behind on some bit of essential knowledge. In a manner of speaking, yes, the goblin strategist replied. While it hasn't been formally recognized yet, the evidence accrued so far appears to be conclusive. It is somewhat embarrassing to realize in hindsight, however. Based on how you conduct your battles, I assumed that it was something that you understood at some level. If I understand what you're referring to, Ludmilla said, then it is in a way which I am unaware of. What is it? The morale of an army, and I use the term army loosely, under the bolstering effects of a commander or an individual with commander-like abilities and skills is extremely difficult to break without directly applying spells, skills or abilities to force the issue. I first noticed this at the Battle of Carney Village. Though my forces were overwhelmingly superior, the regiment from Reistais did not falter. They tried to carry out their orders, tried to hold, tried to fight. The result was that they simply died, but they did not break. It was not until their officers called for a general retreat did they attempt to withdraw. Ludmilla considered the goblin strategist's words, thinking back to the recent wilderness battle. That the goblin army held fast even after taking an incredible beating meant that the enemy commander was bolstering their morale and cohesion in some way. Furthermore, once the demi-humans were issued orders to attack her, they were relentless until the enemy commander was eliminated. Similarly, General Ray's battalion held despite their crippling losses. I agree that this is hardly a troublesome thing, Sigurd said from his bench. Should one of our commanders desire the head of an enemy general, all they need do is send out their champions. We shall gladly retrieve it for you. As if to punctuate his words, the base of Sigurd's frost reaver struck the floor with a thump that echoed around the hall. The sharp hiss of Lord Cocytus' breath joined the sound. Knowing the Grand Marshal's character, he was in firm agreement with Sigurd's sentiment. It is a concern on our end as well, Ludmilla noted. Even unsophisticated opponents understand the importance of what they may equate with a lord. We plan on raising an officer corps that will bring the benefits of commanders to the ranks of the Royal Army. Fighting more advanced opponents aware of this same thing will see our officers being purposely targeted with attacks that they assume will break the cohesion of our forces. A Death Knight can challenge a champion on the ground, but it won't stop something that flies or teleports. Similarly, there are spells, skills and potentially martial arts that cannot be blocked. That type of thinking is very much like you, Shield Maiden, Commander Gunner said, but additional measures are not required, yes? It's true that the portion of our forces a slain commander is responsible for will lose everything that comes with having them, but our army will not fall apart just from that. I agree. Lord Cocytus' brown brain-like insectoid vassal tilted its short body forward. Between the projected strength of potential adversaries that we may encounter in the region, the equipment we've settled on for each grade of officer and the fact that resurrection magic is available, I believe that we have arrived at a cost-effective balance. If opportunity cost becomes a factor, we will rely on stronger commanders for those instances. They were probably correct. The vast majority of her experience revolved around weak commanders with mundane or at best weakly enchanted equipment. This included herself at one point in the past, and she died, so she couldn't deny that she might be overly cautious. The debriefing continued, with Ludmilla going over General Ray's attack on the Highland Plateau. Many in the assembly nodded in approval as she outlined his response to the demi-humans' attempted organization and the battle that culminated from it. This General Ray is very different from the other Imperial commanders, Commander Gunner said. Most of them seem to be just like you. And General Ray is just like you, Commander Gunner, Ludmilla smirked. At least when it comes to his approach to warfare. I told him as much, too. Then I suspect that your time with him has shown you the effectiveness of aggressive tactics from a human perspective, the Frost Giant commander said. Yes, the Goblin strategist said, your approach to warfare has always been rather imbalanced. I understand that you are a defender, but the best defense still readily employs aggression when it can efficiently achieve one's objectives. Between the senior commanders of the Royal Army, those with experience who also possessed commander job class levels, Ludmilla had by far the worst track record in field exercises. A part of her suspected that this was because the others just loved picking apart whatever she could come up with, but the results were the results. As Commander Gunner had noted, Ludmilla's experiences with the 6th Legion did have her see the wider spread effects that an aggressive approach to warfare could produce. It was something that she sorely needed on both a professional and personal level. Her time with His Majesty and Katza Plains stirred aspects of her being that had lain dormant for all of her life, but tactical and strategic exercises with the Royal Army never seemed to help her develop them. Skills, abilities and martial arts appeared very much contingent on a culture that could draw out various aspects of a person to levels where they could be developed and harnessed. Because she had been raised in a martial culture that had long focused on the protection of one's territory and subjects, related powers were easy to grasp. She could be a noble captain who inspired and assured her subjects and subordinates, but she couldn't match her friends when it came to statecraft, economics and diplomacy. The martial training passed down by her parents allowed Ludmilla to quickly grow a respectable repertoire of martial arts and skills that revolved around their highly mobile and defensive schools of combat, but she still only had one high-power attack in the form of Blossoming Iris. Her skills and abilities as a captain were similarly tied to how she was raised and what she believed. For all of her militant demeanor, martial feats and the wariness that fellow members of the House of Lords displayed for her, she was simply not lent to aggression. Therefore, it seemed that her personal art or style of being aggressive was something that would take her a long time to master, as she would need to develop it out of the raw elements of her being with no guidance. After relating what had happened during her assignments, Ludmilla went on to her analysis of the Imperial Army. This included its structure, doctrines, logistics, administration and culture, as well as how each element fit into its role as the institution that provided security for the Baharuth Empire and served as a pillar of the imperial power. As she went through her materials, she found that the reactions of her audience to each topic were varied. Lady Zaradnik, an elder lich in the front row, raised a hand. For those not created to serve, protocols for behavior are understandably required. We, however, do not require such things as culture. Our purpose is clear from the moment of our creation. On the contrary, Ludmilla replied, I believe that it is not only of utmost importance for His Majesty's created servitors to have a culture of their own, but they must also contribute to the greater culture of the Sorceress Kingdom. As time goes on, our influence expands and more created beings enter service, it will become ever more crucial. It isn't as if you don't already have a rudimentary culture already. The values and purpose that you share as created beings create a bond between you beyond the fact that you were all summoned to serve. Then is that not enough? It's not, she shook her head. The culture that you possess is rudimentary, meaning that your protocols for behavior are similarly rudimentary. As our world grows, so too will it become increasingly complex. Created beings are born with knowledge, intelligence and purpose, but it does not mean that you will be able to serve in an optimal capacity in every situation you are exposed to. If it was simply a matter of destroying our enemies, our current course of development will serve its purpose, but the majority of our work does not involve conflict. This work is a battle where the odds are severely stacked against you. The undead are seen as the enemy of all life, and the world's cultures have evolved to incorporate what is a reality when it comes to most naturally manifested undead. A distinction is rarely made for created beings, and we face the challenges that come with this perception. The culture that you develop should contain the protocols that are required to analyze and adapt to your assignments. You are already doing this, in part, but there are many areas that can be improved to help His Majesty achieve the realm that he desires. And what of the culture of the Royal Army as a whole? So far our focus has been on establishing training standards and basic operational doctrines. Ludmilla turned her attention to Commander Gunnar. I believe that the multiracial and multicultural nature of the Sorceress Kingdom will become one of its greatest advantages, she said. This belief extends to the Royal Army. The myriad of perspectives and values in our nation will equip us well for future challenges, be they conquest or collaboration. Not only should this strength be present on the field, but extend to all aspects of a soldier's life, from training to logistics and even to affairs at home. Like what you've been doing in the South, then. I've only just begun, but yes. Admittedly, I started in part out of the desire to preserve my people's culture, but I quickly realized that it was conducive to raising something that the Royal Army was in short supply of. Nestled within the traditions of my people are the methods of raising frontier folk capable of functioning in the conditions that we were continually exposed to. Now, those traditions will become the foundation of a Ranger Corps that will serve the Sorceress Kingdom in what capacity that they can. Seeing how the Empire's nobility went from Riastiz's systems of martial obligation to that of a professional military further reinforced Ludmilla's notions of how her own culture could develop into something that could serve the Sorceress Kingdom. While it wouldn't play a glamorous role in the Royal Army, it was still an integral one that would see widespread use. Furthermore, others might follow her lead, developing their own traditions into something that would fill important niches in not only the Royal Army but in all of the institutions of the state. As the end of the last day of their debriefing drew near, Ludmilla looked down at the table piled with her reports and notes. She turned her gaze to Lord Cocytus. Aside from requesting clarification or requesting that she expand on portions of her presentation, he had mostly refrained from the discussion between the Royal Army's members. Grand Marshal, she said. In light of all that has been presented here, how do you feel about the answers that the Baharuth Empire has provided to the Royal Court? Answers, Another hiss filled the hall as Lord Cocytus expelled a blast of supercooled air. He seemed to ponder Ludmilla's question, a claw coming up under his mandibles in a curiously human-like gesture of deep thought. The answers, he said, need analysis. By the Royal Court. Of many matters, I cannot say. But, in the Imperial Army, there is honor. Those that defend, those that strive, spirit is present. Desire. Yet untempered. And something, disturbing. Disturbing, my lord? To put in words, difficult. Their warrior spirit, detached. I agree with Lord Cocytus, Sigurd rumbled, fingers combing through his frosty beard. Your account of the Empire contains many things unsettling to my ears. It is too much like what we frost giants have experienced in the past 2 centuries. Decadence and decay appear to rise hand in hand with prosperity and development. In times of peace, the eye shifts from the truths of the world because one can afford to live a lie. Is being lulled into falling for these delusions an inevitability? Is every nation bound to grow into a pitiful, bloated thing? How can this be prevented in our own people? I believe you've answered it yourself, Ludmilla replied. People are led astray when they ignore the truths of the world. They can only do so when they can afford it or when those with the authority, influence and resources manipulate perceptions and cause others to align with their warped views. Accomplishing the same thing in the Sorceress Kingdom should be far more difficult. Those confident in their strength, intellect or talent need not look far to find points of comparison that challenge the position in which they've placed themselves. We have an immortal administration in possession of demonstrable truths that will never allow the delusions embraced in the Empire to take root. Ludmilla leaned forward, eyes crossing over the members of the Northern Army Group and the officers of the Sorceress Kingdom's Royal Army. In my report, you have seen the chains that bind a nation, how they are forged, how they are maintained and how they can rust and break through neglect or misuse. Our task is to help create and maintain a society that thrives under His Majesty's light, so I am of the mind that it is an excellent case study for us. Unmatched strength, sterile procedure and raw knowledge may stabilize a nation, facilitate prosperity and help it develop to a certain extent, but the Sorceress Kingdom must forge chains of its own. Chains of law and culture that will bind its people together and foster a spirit that both embraces and transcends the concepts of race and tribe. Some of these chains are already in the process of being forged, but others exist that impede us from our task. We must learn how to break those chains, for we will continue to encounter them as the Sorceress Kingdom develops and its sphere of influence expands. It is only when we can do all this will we truly begin to create the vibrant and harmonious nation that His Majesty desires. Upper Wind Month, 7th day. Nemel's fingers brushed through blonde hair which had grown halfway down her back over the weeks of journeying through the Empire with Dame Verilyn. Her hand came away with several tiny pink petals which were picked up by a gust of wind. The petals flew up to join their fellows in a swirling dance across the cerulean skies. Spring was in full bloom in the Baharuth Empire. With spring came its sense of new beginnings. This felt especially momentous to Nemel. A new life awaited her in a new frontier, a land of potatoes and goblins. The Sorceress Kingdom. No, wait, that doesn't sound right. Master, what is that? So vast. Is this a human place? Yes, Zushiru answered his apprentices. It is the great warrant city of the Empire clan. Still, I did not think it would be so large and flat. Nemel supposed that it was indeed quite large and flat. Our winter had over twice the population of Norford, the second largest city in the Empire. Its sprawling urban layout filled with shops, residences, government buildings and grand monuments created a sprawling metropolis that covered much of the broad river valley below them. Zushiru's emphasis on flat spoke of his nature as a member of a subterranean race. When she had first described the imperial capital to the Quagoa merchant, he burst out into his wheezing laugh. Surely humans were not so foolish as to waste so much space in what was supposedly the crown jewel of their great empire. Races that lived underground did not build flat. They built tall, or maybe it was deep. When the Quagoa saw a human dwelling, they wondered how many hundreds lived within. This was because they naturally imagined that the building went hundreds of meters underground, and what they saw on the surface was only indicative of a vast network of structures below. Though their circuit through the Empire probably had them understand that humans did not build their communities that way, their initial reaction to the sites of the towns and cities tended to always be the same. Where Nemel saw a prosperous city of 100,000, the Quagoa imagined a monstrosity with millions of citizens. Dame Verilyn, who had led in the Dwarf Kingdom's capital of Fioburkana for over a century, also thought this way at first, but her experiences in human cities eventually led her to make more proper conclusions about them. As Nemel had lived in our winter for much of her life, everything about it just seemed normal. If anything, the sight made her nervous. She would be handing in her resignation to the Imperial Army. Worse yet, she would be sitting down with her parents to tell them that she would be leaving the Empire. Rationally speaking, the army probably wouldn't dare say anything if the Sorceress Kingdom was involved. As a spare from a minor house of meager means, securing her new position was something her parents would be ecstatic about. When her sister, Panasis, managed to secure a position as a maid for a high noble's household, their family had thrown an extravagant for house gran, at least, celebration with 5 different potato dishes. Nemel, however, was not very good at being rational. Not when it came to herself, at any rate. Even when she was aware of this, it didn't help. What if the army said no and threw her into prison? Or her father might oppose Nemel's decision to leave and lock her in her bedroom forever. And then Dame Verilyn would turn our winter into a pile of rubble for detaining her over Minion. The destruction of the imperial capital would be Nemel's fault. Nervous. Elise moaned. I know, right? Fendros said, what if we run into our parents? How do you think I feel? Ida moaned, if my parents find out I'm back in the city, they might try to sell me again. They all swallowed, steps turning heavy as they followed the highway down to the city's eastern gate. The customs officials took them aside, supposedly because they had many goods to inspect. This is strange, Zushiru said as they stood about idly. The other cities did not stop us like this. Probably because they want to assign agents to us, Nemel whispered. They had an official of the Sorceress Kingdom with them, and there was no way they would allow her to wander around our winter without handlers or at least observers. Even if Dame Verilyn didn't do anything harmful, some sort of harm might come to her and the Imperial authorities would have to answer for it. Spies again? Dame Verilyn frowned. Should we round up their families? That worked wonderfully the last time. A few seconds later, Zushiru's caravan was waved through with profuse apologies for the inconvenience caused. After checking in at their accommodations, Nemel accompanied Dame Verilyn around the city as she performed her usual wanderings. They eventually wandered over to the first-class district. Nemel fidgeted nervously as they made their way along the pristine pavement to the Imperial Army headquarters. The grounds were decidedly less dismal than she had left them. The ornamental gardens and trees along the lanes were bathed in sunlight and abundant with the fresh greenery of spring. Nemel took several deep breaths in front of the 6th Legion's office before stiffly stepping up the stairs. She nearly turned on her heel when an imposing figure nearly bumped into her coming out of the entrance. "Officer Gran?" "Yes, General Ray, sir." "Officer Gran, sir." Her hand came up in a rigid salute. The staff moving through the lobby cast curious glances in her direction, but they continued on to wherever their tasks were taking them. "I saw that your report from Horst came in," General Ray said, "so I was wondering when you'd show up. Come on up to my office." "Why?" She wanted to submit her resignation as quickly and discreetly as possible and run away. Why was she suddenly being dragged into General Ray's office? The world almost certainly bore a grudge against her. They entered the general's office, which was filled with stacks of boxes marked with various labels. Some of them contained patrol reports, others were filled with reference materials. General Ray's desk was similarly piled high with folders, binders and stationery. Once the door whispered shut behind them, he turned to lean against his desk. "So," he said, "I've been told that you'll be heading to Zaradnik Barony." Nemel felt her eyes growing so wide that she feared that they would roll out of their sockets. How did he know? No, he was a general. Not just any general, but General Ray. Why did she think she could hide anything from him? She was just stupid Junior Mage Officer Nemel Gran. "Yes, sir." That was about all she could manage. General Ray nodded slowly. Nemel wondered what dire things were about to happen to her. "I'd like to thank you for the excellent job you've done," he said. "I had some high expectations since you're from House Gran, but you've managed to surpass them by far." "I did my best, sir." "And now you're on your way to the Sorceress Kingdom. Normally, the Empire wouldn't off someone that ends up as a dignitary in a foreign land as a matter of protocol." Nemel shifted uncomfortably, swallowing the lump in her throat. About that, sir," she said. "I was going to resign my commission." "Resign?" The general straightened with a frown. "I understand that you won't be able to work your regular job with the Imperial Air Service, but that's no reason to quit the Imperial Army. If anything, you'll be holding a very important post. But it's more a desk job." "If you think that's all it'll be," General Ray said, "you're sorely mistaken. You'll be within arm's reach of Baroness Zaradnik, after all. She has a keen interest in all manner of military affairs, and I don't doubt that she'll take an interest in your work as a war wizard in the Imperial Air Service." Lady Zaradnik had expressed her interest in that, so maybe General Ray knew what he was talking about. Nemel had only been in the army for half a year, however, so she was hardly in a position to serve Lady Zaradnik in that capacity. What should I do?" "Continue your studies in the Imperial Military Academy, for one," the general told her. "That way, you'll be better equipped to answer any questions to her satisfaction. You can take your coursework with you. Taking a hippogriff along is probably not an option, but they'll probably provide you with a mount if necessary. Who knows, you might end up flying around with a dragon." Nemel laughed politely on General Ray's cue. "Speaking of which," he said, "you never did directly mention who Frost 19 was in your reports. I was hoping to meet them when they finally arrived in our winter." "Oh, ah." She turned around, wondering where Dame Verilyn was. After feeling around herself for a moment, her fingers closed around something soft. The frost dragon let out a cute and decidedly undragon-like squeak. "Why, you could have just said something." Dame Verilyn shot Nemel a look. "I wasn't even sure where you were." "I understand why she was impossible for the other agents to track now," General Ray said. "So this is her, huh?" "Yes, sir," Nemel nodded. "Dame Verilyn, a knight of House Zaradnik. It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance, Dame Verilyn, the general bowed slightly. I would love to take you for a tour of our winter, but my schedule is packed full of meetings for the next few weeks. Officer Gran is a native of the city, however, so I'm sure she'll be able to show you around. General Ray walked them back out of the building before jogging off to attend a meeting. Nemel sighed. That went nowhere near what I planned, she said. This is bad, isn't it? The way he made it sound, Dame Verilyn said, it's to your advantage. The Imperial Army will know they can't call on you, you'll be able to learn things that please Lady Zaradnik and I still get my minion. A part of her feared where it would all lead, but, for the time being, it felt too reasonable to refuse out of hand. They walked over to the Imperial Military Academy, which was down the road from the Imperial Army headquarters. Nemel showed Dame Verilyn around while updating her coursework and picking up new materials. At least she would have plenty of time to study while her new lands were being cleared and readied for potatoes. As the evening's shadows grew long, Nemel strolled towards her family's home with Dame Verilyn. Thanks for coming with me to get all this stuff done, Nemel said. I said it wouldn't take long, but it's nearly night time. If it must be done, Dame Verilyn replied, then it must be done. Nothing will keep me from keeping my minions. By the way, Ida mentioned something about her parents selling her. How much will I have to pay your parents for you? Will they haggle? Maybe I should have brought Zushiru along. Huh? No. I mean, you don't have to buy me. I'm your vassal, right? And not a slave, I hope. I guess? You must see why classic minions are superior by now. They willingly work for free for the greater good of me. Her father would definitely have something to say if he heard that. On the way to the gate of House Gran, they encountered a familiar figure coming out of the gate across from it. A young woman waited outside her carriage as a footman loaded her bags. As Nemel came close, she turned and adjusted her spectacles. Nemel? Dimia leaned forward as she peered at them, and a super hottie. How hasn't she been mobbed by a tainted on the way in? They're probably scared of her, Nemel replied. Huh? It's nothing. This is Dame Verilyn, a knight from the Sorceress Kingdom. Dame Verilyn, this is Dimia Tila Elerix. She's the eldest daughter of House Erix and a junior official with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Dimia straightened with a grin, planting her hands on her hips. I won't be a junior officer for long. All kinds of honors are coming my way. Really? But we're still technically students. I won't let that stop me, Dimia replied. Besides, this stuff's basically falling into my lap. What kind of stuff? Nemel asked. Did you hear about the fighting down south? Dimia asked back. There was an advisory about the Wyvern Mark. Yep, that. The new expeditionary army did some stuff down there last month, and now the entire Imperial administration is busy reviewing their policies and how they pursue them. That's weird. Doesn't the Empire usually just take over and redevelop everything? They even put up commissions hoping that adventurers and workers will take care of the big problems. Plus they transformed the land, making it inhospitable to anyone else. It wasn't just the big problems, all the animals, plants and everything else that used to live in the land that they developed could no longer live there. I guess that's one way to put it. Dimia scratched her chin. Maybe I can use that for something. Anyway, turns out we suck at expanding and no one knows what they're doing. Everyone's busy as heck revamping policies and processes and all that. The Imperial Army is undergoing reforms as well. Didn't they undergo reforms half a year ago? Wait, we suck? What happened? I think the gist of it is that what we do in the Empire doesn't work out there. They got in a big fight with demi-humans and hundreds of Imperial Knights died. That's bad, isn't it? New Imperial Knights don't just come out of nowhere. New ones don't, Dimia smirked, but old ones do. We have almost 2 legions worth of Imperial Knights that had to retire early and they all want their jobs back. Competition for empty positions is stiff and interest in the Imperial Army is at an all-time high. That doesn't make any sense, Nemel furrowed her brow. Why would people want to join the army when it just got beat up? Dimia waggled her finger at Nemel, making a tch sound. You're a really nice girl, Nemel, but that's not how it works. People get interested when they think stuff's getting done. When that stuff looks tough, all the talented and ambitious people come out of the woodwork because they think they can measure up and the reward is worth their time and skills. People were crazy. A life of peace and potatoes was best. Why couldn't they be happy with that? Anyway, Dimir continued, things are pretty busy around here now. The court council's already swamped as it is, so Lady Freyanne's taken charge of the initiative and General Ray's been working day and night to restructure the 6th Legion. If it was Lady Freyanne, Nemel didn't think anything could go wrong. She was a genius superwoman, after all. Still, the sorts of changes Dimir described were unprecedented. This feels pretty big, Nemel said. What did His Imperial Majesty say about it? He's fully backing the changes. Really? Really? Jumped right on board and told everyone to get to work. A lot of it has to do with the Empire's approach to demi-human relations, so. Dimir shrugged as if the rest was self-explanatory. Nemel racked her brains for a connection, but nothing came out. I've been doing army things since the promotional examination, she said. I must have missed something important. Oh, that's right. Well, the short of it is that His Imperial Majesty's become really good friends with a demi-human sovereign from one of the nations under the Sorceress Kingdom. That friendship is influencing how he wants the Empire to view demi-humans in general now. Wow, Nemel breathed. Even that Emperor, the power of friendship is amazing. I guess the Sorceress Kingdom is really starting to transform things. Yep. The setting sun glinted off of Dimir's spectacles as she nodded. If you look down on everything from high up, you can tell it's the Sorceress Kingdom's doing. Every move that they make basically nudges the Empire closer in line with their national policy. That Sorcerer King is really something. He has all sorts of amazing people, too. Sure does. I got to meet a few of them, they're all great. Baroness Saradnik is scary though. She appeared in my window just as I was going to bed a few weeks ago and I almost peed myself. Just popped up like some kinda ghost, told me that some stuff was going to happen and left. Lady Freyanne and I had plenty of time to prepare for it. Did that mean the Baroness popped up in Lady Freyanne's bedroom window as well? So you know Baroness Saradnik? Sure do. She's Dame Verilyn, isn't that the name of Lady Saradnik's knight? Yes, she's a knight of House Saradnik. Oh, gem. Dimir examined Dame Verilyn, who took a step back at her intense interest. Aren't you supposed to be a dragon? Dimir asked, one that can fit under my bed. That threat doesn't seem so threatening now. What? Dame Verilyn blinked. Nothing. Forget I said anything. But I can't. Dimir hopped into her carriage, shutting the door behind her. Nemel and Dame Verilyn stared as the vehicle vanished around the bend. Anyway, Nemel said after several moments, my place is that gate just across from here. The footman at the gate of Grand Manor greeted Nemel and Dame Verilyn with a smile, escorting them into the manor and announcing their arrival at the hall. Her mother rose from the main table, the skirts of her red silken robe swirling at her feet. Nemel. Baroness Gran embraced her tightly. Thank the gods you're all right. I've been worried sick since you left me with that strange message. Oh. Nemel replied in a squished voice, sorry. But if you were that worried, why didn't you message me back? I thought you might be on some army thing. Anyway, it's a good thing that you're safe. Is everything all right? Actually, there's something I need to talk to you and Father about. Her mother gave Dame Verilyn a glance before leaving the hall to get Baron Gran, who was working in the manor laboratory. They seated themselves at the table after a quick set of introductions. Nemel took a deep breath, gathering her resolve. Lord Father, Lady Mother, I'm leaving the Empire. What? Nemel, her mother and Dame Verilyn all flinched at Baron Gran's outburst. Nemel, her mother said, your Lord Father will lose all of his hair if you keep making dramatic statements like that. Keep? Dame Verilyn asked curiously. She suddenly announced that she was joining the army like that, too. Her mother leaned over as if to share some bit of gossip. My Nemel could have chosen a safe and stable career in any department of the Empire or just worked in the family business, but she chose that dreadful path. I told you, my Lady Mother, Nemel told her parents for what was probably the 50th time, being a mage in the Imperial Air Service is very safe, safer than being in the city, even. That's just what they want you to think, her mother replied. You're called a war wizard for a reason, you know. You say you're safe up there, but I just know that you're going to end up in the clutches of a dragon one day. Too late. Her mother had said that a few times, but how it happened probably wasn't what she had in mind. Nemel glanced at her father, whose increasingly grim expression prompted her to explain what had happened. She left out anything too exciting lest he leap over the table and attempt to strangle Dame Verilyn. Or maybe zap her with a lightning bolt. Are you sure this is what you want, Nemel? Nemel shifted uncomfortably at her mother's question. She had been asked the exact same thing when she decided to join the army, which was barely 2 seasons ago. Changing her course so quickly probably didn't look very convincing. I'm tired. Nemel looked down at the table. I don't know how you do it. Just trying to live in the Empire makes me tired. Everyone uses everyone and not in a good way. No one cares. They're just out to get as much as they can for themselves. People will even turn against their own families if it gets them what they want. The Empire is all about itself. I thought maybe I could get by just minding my own business, but I can't even do that. They come after you if they think you can be used, and I care too much about what goes on around me. Just living here feels like it hurts my soul. Maybe it sounded overly dramatic, but she did feel that way. As much as she cared about what went on around her, she wasn't an amazing person that could change the world like Lady Freyan or Lady Zaradnik. She wasn't resilient and opportunistic like Dimair. For Nemel, the Empire was a place where she could only helplessly watch while people were ground to dust by the wheels of progress. The Imperial Magic Academy tried to instill a sense of collective pride into its students. A bright future was painted for the Empire's citizens, and many allowed themselves to dream a dream that they were told to dream. Noble scions understood things for what they were, and many embraced their reality, but Nemel couldn't. At least working for Dame Verilyn was a chance to make the world a better place for everyone, if only just a little part of it. What about tenants? This land you're going to is an undeveloped frontier, her father said. You're just a noble, who is going to work in this territory. That's, Dame Verilyn said something about goblins? Do the goblins they know how to farm? Manage copses? Smith? Weave? Trade? Nemel and Dame Verilyn stared blankly at Baron Gran. Her father sighed. Since you're here, he said, you should collect some tenants. Hold on while I get our census records. Her father left and returned shortly after with a large, half-filled binder. You shouldn't just take anyone, he told her. Our tenants are most likely to be loyal to you, and they should have spares enough to get the territory of yours started. You don't have a problem with me going? You're 16, Nemel. Her father said, old enough to be married for 2 years now. It wouldn't be right to treat you like a child. I don't know what you've been through, but you seem to have gotten a good look at the world around us. What you said has a lot more substance than the army spiel you gave us last summer. What about the goblins? Nemel asked. What about them? Her father frowned. Aren't you scared something will happen to me? Believe it or not, her father said, our family came from a place where humans lived with all sorts of other races. The world was a different place back then. Well, humans can get along just fine with other races out in the world right now as well. Carnassus and Arglant have human citizens, and Roble trades with Demis, too. If anything, it's the human countries around the theocracy that are abnormal, including the Empire. If you have goblins or whatever living as your subjects, you have to take care of them all the same. As a noble, you'll have to make considerations for all of the races that live under you. I didn't know you thought that way. There was no reason for you to believe that I thought that way. Now, you should get started on that list. It might take a while to track some of them down. Nemel flipped the binder towards herself, opening it and reaching out for a blank sheet of paper. Dame Verilyn shifted closer. What are you doing? She asked. Finding the people that we need to start a hamlet, Nemel answered. If it's pure wilderness, we'll need to start out with industries that will help start land development. She flipped to the relevant section of the registry, going through the family lists. Oh, I've seen something like this before. You have? Nemel looked up at Dame Verilyn. It's something that Lady Zaradnik does every time she wants to move people around. Dame Verilyn nodded. There were some basic guidelines that helped narrow things down. Let's see, first is family names. Originally, many people took their family names from professions that they were successful in. Someone named Smith comes from a line of Smiths, for instance. Smith Kovalev in Warden's Vale is an example of this. His name means son of the blacksmith in a language group that Lady Zarodnik is familiar with. Nemel looked for a family with a spare, following what Dame Verilyn had mentioned. Well, we're looking for woodcutters to clear land. What if they're named after trees or other plants? Lady Zarodnik has a whole bunch of those, Dame Verilyn nodded. Oh, sometimes you have ranger blood mixed into those as well. I have a lot of forest to manage, so we'll need plenty. Ah, Lord Gran, do you have older registries? The longer the lineage, the better. Especially if they've come from a long line of successful generations that have been breeding with other successful lineages of the same vocation. What you're doing sounds like what House Gran has done all these years, Nemel's mother murmured. We have? Nemel frowned. How else do you think we keep producing third-tier wizards? Her mother said, our traditions are treated as superstitions in the Empire, but the results speak for themselves. People just dance around trying to discredit us however they can because it doesn't fit with the way they've been taught to see the world. It's impossible to do it with the common folk though. The temples try to get as far away from the teachings of the theocracy as they can, and they have far more sway than we do. Baroness Zarodnik is a follower of the Six. That's not surprising. With what you've mentioned and her southern name, I assumed that she was. They continued making their list and her parents joined in as well. A half hour later, she started working on a different group of names. What's this list for? Dame Verilyn asked. For when we need them, Nemel answered. We don't need farmers and such for now because there's no land for them to work on until we clear some fields. Tenant families usually teach all of their kids the basics of their profession, but they'll mostly focus on the child who will inherit the tenancy. Every vocation needs training, so we can train our future tenants by subsidizing their education. If they're being paid for, their parents won't have to pick and choose whom to sink their resources into, and we'll have a journeyman ready to work for us in a few years. The parents shouldn't object because most people want to see their children succeed. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement. But who pays for it? You do? Dame Verilyn peered at her suspiciously. The fact that she was a frost dragon had entirely slipped Nemel's mind. Why, you'll get it back, she said hurriedly. We'll be drawing up contracts of indenture for them, so it'll work just like apprenticeships with the trade guilds. They'll slowly pay off what they owe once they start working, and, after that, they'll be tenants who contribute to your domain incomes. Are you sure that it will work that way? That's how it always works? Unless they die or something, but what are the chances of that? Nemel wasn't sure what else she could say. It was so common sense that no one in the Empire or anywhere else that she knew of challenged it. Well, all right, wait. Isn't indentured servitude slavery? Technically it falls under imperial slavery laws, yes. They're not bad laws though. Then it won't work. But why? Because slavery is illegal in the Sorceress Kingdom. Lady Zarodnik will skin me if I start importing slaves. But wasn't it perfectly normal? Every apprentice signed a contract of indenture as per guild regulations. Then how do apprentices pay their way in the Sorceress Kingdom? Nemel asked. In Warden's Vale, Dame Verilyn answered, House Zarodnik pays for universal education and training. The graduates go where she needs them to go after that. There are a dozen chartered institutions and companies that are hungry for skilled labor in her territory. How rich was Lady Zarodnik? In what world did a minor noble have the administrative and professional apparatus necessary to manage everything that Dame Verilyn described? She held the title of Baroness but undertook a slew of ventures that were normally considered the realm of kings, emperors and major religious organizations. So it's like a scholarship, Baron Gran said. What's that? If the Empire identifies a talented individual, they offer them a scholarship that pays for their education and training. In return, the graduate works for the government. So Nemel will start a scholarship fund? Her mother said. More like an indenture fund, Baron Gran snorted. Permanent indenture. You take it and you're stuck for life. Oh, I like the sound of that, Dame Verilyn said. Maybe I can add additional payments to it somehow. That's evil, Nemel shouted. She fumed silently at Dame Verilyn. People needed education and training to live a decent life. Why was she trying to stack debts on top of them for that? Just to be safe, Baron Gran said, you should base that fund in the Empire. Companies do it all the time, so no one will pay any attention to it here. We have endless amounts of spares so it can serve as a source of tenants that fit your criteria. People in the Empire are encouraged to treat that bloodline stuff as superstition from a bygone era so you'll have no serious competitors. You could charter a new service with it, Nemel's mother said. Sages and bards can be hired to conduct research for you and you can fund the training for highly promising spares. If Lady Zaradnik is a follower of the Six, she'll gladly take them for her frontier development. An indenture agency? No, that sounds like the slave markets. The Eternal Winter Agency? Dame Verilyn suggested. How did it turn into this? She went from being scared of her parents' reaction to her decision to starting up some sort of spare agency with a dire-sounding name. The concept wasn't bad, though. The Empire had millions of spares and most of them would live and die in poverty. Nemel could at least provide a few with opportunities that they wouldn't otherwise have. It was already far more than she could have ever accomplished as a war wizard in the Imperial Air Service. Over the next week, they traveled around Gran Barony and Arwinter, tracking down the families and spares on her list. The ones out in the countryside were shocked upon being informed of their candidacy but readily agreed to her proposal. Of the ones in Arwinter that survived, the few who had found stable employment refused to move. The ones eking out a living in the slums cried in relief and gratitude when Nemel explained what was going on, which made her cry too. One night, as they were enjoying a late dinner in the second-class market districts, Dame Verilyn shared something odd with Nemel. After seeing all these spares and how they come about, Dame Verilyn said, I think I get it, now. How clever. Get what? Nemel asked. The merit inherent to the Empire's meritocracy, the Frost Dragon told her. What the Baruth Empire is ultimately trying to achieve. In nature, those fit to survive will breed and pass on their legacy. The Empire, however, manipulates those survival criteria and exploits the attraction to success to breed a population that is both productive, weak and easy to manage. They are trying to turn themselves into desirable minions, or perhaps desirable livestock. A survival strategy that secures the protection of the powerful by cultivating qualities that prospective masters might desire. That's why the Emperor suddenly capitulated to the Sorcerer's Kingdom. He had found the ideal overlord and offered up the fruit of their efforts, a self-sustaining, easy-to-police and highly productive minion state that could never present a threat to beings of true power. No wonder everyone calls him a genius. Nemel's mouth fell open in mute horror. That couldn't be right, could it? Could it? With Zusharu's schedule, they had a total of 2 weeks to prepare everyone for the move, so there was more than enough time to be thorough. On their last day in Arwinter, as they went around picking everyone up, Nemel called for the wagons to halt. What's the matter? Dame Verilyn asked. We're passing by a friend's place, Nemel answered. I have no idea when I'll be in Arwinter again, so it'll be good to pay them a visit while I can. Dame Verilyn followed her down a street packed with the drab, crowded and ubiquitous housing common to the city's third-class districts. They stopped 3 blocks in from the street, where Nemel knocked on the door of an unremarkable building. Hello? Mrs. Testania? It's me, Nemel. She knocked on the door again. It was early morning, so she should have been in. There's no one inside, Dame Verilyn said. That can't be right, Nemel furrowed her brow. She's always at home this early. Dame Verilyn looked up and down the street before raising a fist. The entire row of buildings seemed to shudder as she thumped the doorframe. She listened intently before giving Nemel a look. There is one person inside, she said, but they show no sign of being alive. Nemel's stomach sank at the implications of her words. They finally found a 1st Legion patrol 30 minutes later and waited outside the Testania residence as they investigated her report. The patrol's cleric came out shortly after and shook her head. She's been dead for at least 2 weeks, Miss Gran, the cleric said. I'm sorry. A tear trickled down Nemel's cheek. Do you know how? She was sick. It was some disease that regular priests couldn't cure. Did she die from that? I don't know whether it was because of some disease or not, but she died in bed and looked severely malnourished. She starved? But that's impossible. Jet sends her money every. Her teary eyes widened and she raised a hand to her ear, casting a message spell. Jet? Jet. No response. The spell didn't even connect with her target. With the 6th Legion done with whatever it was doing, she thought that he would be on his way back, if not already at home. Once realization fully sunk in, A painful sob racked her body. She turned to clutch at Dame Verulin's breast. "I hate this place." Amidst her tears, the final chain that bound Nemel Gran to the Empire snapped. The one person that she had joined the army for, the one that she might have stayed for, if he had asked, was gone. "I hate this place." She hated the Empire. She hated how selfish it was, how it selfishly used people and how it created people that were the same. She hated how it relentlessly crushed people underfoot with uncaring steps towards a vision of limitless greed. How it packaged everything that it desired in a shiny wrapper of hollow righteousness and pretty imagery. It was a place where the image of a nation was held up, where the people were told that it was good and that they should be proud of it. They were told to do what it wanted, to sacrifice their lives for its benefit, and the vast majority could do nothing but comply because absolute authority belonged to the architects of that vision. As the years and generations went by, society warped and twisted until the very soul of the Empire became a toxic abomination that put green dragons to shame. The things that mattered to Nemel were not reliant on the existence of the Empire. If anything, she would scream to those she cared about, scream for them to flee before it twisted them as well. Perhaps change would come one day, but there were already better places in the world to live. After weeping herself dry, Nemel looked up at Dame Verilin. "Let's go home."